For most of human history, the workweek didn't exist. Not shorter. Not ends of times online. Not easier. It simply wasn't a thing. There were no clocks. No shifts. No bosses. No Mondays. And yet your ancestors survived just fine for hundreds of thousands of years. Here's the part that breaks modern brains. The deeper anthropologists dig into how ancient humans actually lived, the stranger the picture gets. Because by almost every honest measure, they worked far less than we do. Not a little less. Dramatically less. Some estimates put it around 15 to 20 hours a week. Read that number again. That's a part-time job by today's standards. And it raises a much sharper question than the title. If our distant ancestors could feed themselves, raise children, and build entire cultures on a part-time schedule, then what exactly are the rest of us doing for 40, 50, 60 hours a week? To answer that, you have to walk into their world first. Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer somewhere on a warm grassland, roughly 30,000 years ago. You wake up when the light wakes you. There is no alarm. There is no commute. Your office is the landscape around you. You stretch, eat something left from yesterday, and wander out with a small group. Maybe you track an animal for a few hours. Maybe you gather roots, nuts, berries, and tubers along the way. Maybe you come home with nothing, and someone else's catch feeds you tonight. By early afternoon, the day's work is essentially done. The rest is talking, resting, making tools, telling stories, fixing a sandal, holding a baby, scratching designs into bone. This isn't a romantic fantasy. This is what anthropologists kept finding when they actually started measuring. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Lee spent months living with the Juhoensi people of the Kalahari. He didn't ask them how hard they worked. He timed them. What he found became famous in anthropology circles. The adults spent only about 15 to 20 hours a week on what we'd call subsistence work. Hunting, gathering, food preparation, the basics. Children and teenagers worked almost nothing. Elders worked almost nothing. And the food they brought home was, on average, more nutritious and more varied than the diet of many modern office workers. Marshall Solins, another anthropologist, looked at studies like this and gave the era a now famous nickname. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Not because they had wealth, because they had time. Think about that for a second. The people we picture as desperate, starving, constantly fleeing predators were, in many cases, the most leisure-rich humans who have ever lived. But here's the part that really stings. It didn't stay that way. About 12,000 years ago, something changed. Humans started farming. And on paper, this should have been the great upgrade. More food. More stability. More everything. Except the bones tell a different story. When archaeologists examined skeletons from early farming villages, they found people who were shorter than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. They found more cavities, more signs of malnutrition, more repetitive stress injuries from grinding grain hour after hour, more evidence of disease spreading through dense, settled populations. And they found something even stranger. These early farmers seemed to be working much harder than the people who came before them. Some anthropologists have argued controversially that agriculture was one of the worst trades humans ever made. It's a real debate, not a settled fact. But the evidence keeps stacking up on one side. Farming didn't free us. It chained us to fields, to seasons, to surpluses that needed defending. And once you have a surplus, something new appears. People who own the surplus. And people who work it. Hierarchy. Bosses in the deepest sense of the word. For the first time in human history, your day belonged to someone else. Now pause for a second because I want to know what you think. If ancient hunter-gatherers really had more free time than we do, would you actually trade your life for theirs? No phone. No medicine. No coffee. But also no inbox, no rent, no Sunday night dread. Tell me in the comments, would you take that deal? Drop a yes or a no and tell me why. I read every single one. Now back to the story, because it gets even weirder. Industrialization didn't fix this. It made it dramatically worse. In the 1800s, factory workers in Europe and America routinely worked 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Children worked next to them. Entire families disappeared into machines for most of their waking lives. Compared to a hunter-gatherer's afternoon nap, this was a kind of horror. The 40-hour workweek we treat as normal today wasn't carved into nature. It was fought for, painfully, by labor movements that thought even 40 hours was still too much. And it's worth saying out loud. 40 hours is still more than double what your deep ancestors did. So what changed? Why do we, with all our technology, work more than people who hunted with stone-tipped spears? Here's the important part. It isn't because we have to. It's because we built a world where work expanded to fill every container we gave it. Faster tools didn't shorten our days. They raised expectations. Email didn't replace letters. It added to them. Productivity went up. Leisure didn't. Now imagine you're back in that ancient camp just for a moment. The fire is low. A few people are humming. Someone is carving a piece of antler. A child is asleep on a hide. No one is checking anything. No one is behind on anything. The concept of being behind doesn't exist yet. That's the part that's hardest for modern minds to hold. Our ancestors weren't lazy. They weren't unambitious. They simply lived in a world where enough was actually enough. When the food was caught, the work was done. When the tools were sharp, the work was done. When the children were fed, the work was done. There was no further metric. No quarterly target. No infinite ladder. That, more than any single invention, might be the real difference between their lives and ours. Not the tools. Not the medicine. The endlessness. Of course, it would be dishonest to romanticize this completely. Ancient life had real hardship. Infant mortality was high. A bad injury could be a death sentence. A drought could empty a region. And cooperation wasn't optional because being cast out of the group often meant not surviving. But within those limits, the day itself was, by our standards, astonishingly soft. Long stretches of rest. Long stretches of conversation. Long stretches of just being with other humans. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer communities report something else too. People talk constantly. They laugh constantly. Loneliness, in the modern epidemic sense, is rare. It's hard to be lonely when your work and your social life and your family are the same 20 people moving through the same day together. Compare that to a modern open-plan office, or a delivery driver eating lunch in a parked car, or a remote worker who hasn't spoken aloud since Tuesday. Something got optimized. Something else got lost. And here's the strangest twist of all. Your body still expects the old schedule. The stress system in your nervous system was tuned for short bursts of intensity, followed by long stretches of recovery. A chase. A climb. A confrontation. Then rest. Lots of rest. It was never designed for an 8-hour meeting marathon. It was never designed for a notification that pings at 11 at night. It was never designed for a job that follows you home in your pocket. So when modern people feel exhausted by hours that would have horrified their ancestors, that exhaustion isn't weakness. It's a mismatch. A Stone Age body trying to survive a spreadsheet age week. This is the part that might genuinely change how you see your own day. Your tiredness isn't a personal failing. It's a signal. A very old one. Whispering that this pace was never the plan. Tonight, when you finally close your laptop or step away from the register or peel off your uniform, notice something. Notice the relief. Notice how your shoulders drop. Notice how your breath gets deeper. That feeling is older than agriculture. Older than cities. Older than money. It's the same feeling your ancestors had 30,000 years ago when the sun started to set and the day's hunt was over. The work is done. There is nothing more to chase today. The only difference is, for them, that feeling lasted hours. For us, it lasts about as long as it takes to open one more app. Maybe the goal isn't to go back. We can't, and most of us wouldn't really want to. But maybe it's worth knowing that the version of life we treat as normal is, on the long timeline of our species, deeply unusual. For 95% of human history, your ancestors worked less, rested more, and weren't behind on anything. That's not a fantasy. That's the baseline. We're the strange ones. If this changed how you think about your week, do me a favor and hit that like button, because it genuinely helps these ideas reach more people. Subscribe to Hominin for more stories about who we used to be and why we still feel it in our bones. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing from ancient daily life you wish you could bring back into yours? I'll see you in the next one, where we'll dig into something even older, even stranger, and even closer to home than you'd guess. Until then, try to remember, you were never built for endless. You were built for enough.